Wow, with this plastic phone, I can't see anything. Everything's just so small. Hey girl, you need to help me here. I need help sending this picture to Shirley. You listen to me?
Huh?
Come off of that tic-tac and help me with this here phone.
Oh, just hit the share button. It's just like a little arrow pointing up. It's like the share button on the top right.
No, that's not gonna work. That's too complicated. I'm gonna go down to CVS and I'm gonna print the pictures and I'm gonna send it to her through the mail.
No, it's really okay, Grandma. Just give me your phone. I can show you.
I don't know what's wrong with your generation. You know, there's nothing wrong with sending something through the mail. If I wanted to call somebody, I would go down there to the nearest payphone, and that was 10 miles away, and I would walk on foot to that payphone. Y'all let your phone do everything for you. Y'all don't even want to check your spelling. That's the problem. What's wrong with y'all generation? Y'all are too lazy. You think the computer's gonna get you a job? I had to walk in with my resume and ask everybody, are you hiring? I don't want to hear there's no jobs, because there's plenty of jobs out there.
Bruh.
The older generation always has something to say about the younger generation. Usually we hear them say that we rely on our phones too much, we don't know how to socialize, and that we're lazy. Elders often make negative comments about the generations after them. In the 70s, it was get a job, you hippie. In the 90s, it was turn off that rap music. And in the 2000s, it's get off that phone. And yes, eventually you'll become the older generation that will be saying the same things to the younger generation. Let's dive into the generational wars and why we just can't seem to get along. Starting off with nostalgia. There's this sense of tribalism that we have with generations. Everyone likes to rep that they're from a certain generation. People are proud to call themselves millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. And a lot of that pride comes from the nostalgia that we have from our childhood. If you enjoyed your childhood of your generation, you are always going to see it as the best. Like for me, I always place old school games like Sims 2, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, Street Fighter, the early Resident Evils. I'm always going to view them as the best because they're nostalgic. And I can't help but side-eye the new games sometimes because I just feel like they can't compare to what I grew up with. Does this mean that the new games are bad? No, it's just because of that nostalgia we have a hard time appreciating something new. The same goes for generations. Because so many things are nostalgic for the older generations, they are very quick to discredit the lifestyles, trends, and people of the newer generation. They just don't make them like they used to. Older folk romanticize the past, even if those things weren't exactly the best. Take the dial-up computers of the 90s. They're super clunky, slow, and just straight up rudimentary. But the older generations love it because of their simplicity. It was what they knew and what they were used to, which also leads me to my next point. For older people, there's a lack of understanding new technology. The older generations tend to shun new technology, especially when they don't know how to use them. As we advance as a population, we will have more technology that's even more efficient and convenient. Those of past generations have trouble understanding the new systems, which leads to animosity for the new generation as a whole. No one likes to feel like they're left behind, like they're not with the times. So to feel better about not knowing something, it's easy to attack the technology and say it's not good. This is why some old people have a hard time adapting and learning the new ways of living and the new ways of thinking. You will always hear older people say, back in my day, I didn't have no GPS, I didn't have Siri, or we didn't have all these fancy gadgets.
I don't like everything the way it is now compared to the way it used to be. In my day, we had radio, and you couldn't see anything, and it was primitive and lousy, and we liked it.
There's also a sense of perceived laziness. Once we turn into the older generation, I can guarantee you we are probably going to call the younger generation lazy. That has always been a trend throughout history, where the older generation mocks or scolds the younger generation for being quote unquote lazy.
She said Gen Z, they can be really annoying. Now, obviously, the problem with this statement, she might be right, but the problem is that Gen Z will probably say that the older generation are really annoying. So we got both sides here. What are your thoughts on that?
And also, I think the work ethic is, you know, it's missing in the younger kids. They don't get it. You know, it's like Jodie Foster said here. She said, you know, they're coming late and they want to leave early. They're not really feeling it today, so they want to leave early. I mean, can you imagine going into work or being lucky enough to be mentored by someone like Jodie Foster and say, oh, I'm not really feeling it today, I want to go home early? It's their whole attitude is wrong.
I think you're jealous because they're getting away with it. They're getting away with the things that we wanted to get away with. We want to go, oh, I'll leave that. I'm not feeling it today. But you're right, we got whooped. We got whooped back in the day. When you
Boy, did we get whooped.
From the comments of this video, many older people went on to say that Gen Z is weak, saying that we were not raised well, and that we are entitled. I find it interesting when someone says that we are incapable because we are glued to our phones, but what do some parents do when their kids make noise?
I hate Gen Z. They are just so glued to their devices, so torn away from the world around them.
A lot of the comments were older folk mentioning how hard they had to struggle, lots of trauma dumping to validate their dislike of Gen Z. The older generations did have a difficult time in the workplace, there's no doubt, but it just seems like the dislike is that we seemingly don't struggle as much, so there can be some jealousy there. I'd like to mention that the point of generations working hard is to make a world that is better for the children. To dislike a generation because they are using the advancements and reaping the benefits of improved systems and ways of thinking is contradicting. It is possible that in some degree we are lazy, as we have a lot of technology that is able to do things for us. We have loads of information at our fingertips, so the older generations say we have nothing to complain about. So when younger people complain, is it that we are spoiled and lazy, or do we actually have real issues like a crumbling economy?
It's not that the new generation is more difficult to work with, it's that the older generation is more difficult to work for. They said that the newer generation apparently are lazy. It's not that they're lazy, they're not getting paid enough to do more than what they're already hired to do. That's not called being lazy, that's called taking a stance and having standards.
What older generations tend to ignore is their very own impact on the future generations, what their own political peers have been doing that impacted or changed the scope for future generations ahead. Take, for example, when discussing the economic crisis of 2007 to 2009.
So I think this is the most significant financial crisis in the post-war period.
There are fears the sell-off will continue on Wall Street.
Soaring gas prices, falling home prices, and rising unemployment.
Baby boomers were quick to criticize Gen X and millennials, saying that they weren't working hard enough, which is why they were still living with their parents. But no one thought that it might have been the older officials that were making poor decisions for the country that ultimately led to the recession. Bruce Gibney, the author of A Generation of Sociopaths, I don't agree with this title, by the way. The boomers, according to Gibney, have committed generational plunder, pillaging the nation's economy, repeatedly cutting their own taxes, financing 2 wars with deficits, ignoring climate change, presiding over the death of America's manufacturing core, and leaving future generations to clean up the mess they created. With issues in the economy comes issues with the job market. You've probably heard this from older generations.
It seems like nobody wants to work these days.
Younger generations are having a hard time trying to find work. The job market is terrible, but that often gets passed up as the younger generation is just being lazy. That's why they're not getting jobs. If you guys want to talk more about the job market, I do go into detail in this video here. I will link it there. I just basically talk about the job market and how it is terrible for our generation. Some of the younger generation just aren't participating in the 9-to-5 drudgery because it's just not as rewarding as it was in the past. You could work for McDonald's and provide for your whole family. Now people are struggling to make ends meet.
I work 5 days out of the week, 40 hours a week, okay? I do not make enough to live on my own. 20 years ago when you were getting started, you could live on your own. 20 years ago when you first started, you were able to do everything that I am now struggling to do. Let me add another perspective here. You have 20 years of experience in a career that has allowed you to gain raises, to get more money, to profit you in an economy that you created. You can sit here and you can call Gen Z lazy all you want, but I've been working my tail end off just to barely make it by. And respectfully, I don't want to do that for the rest of my life. And that is what you created. We can sit here and we can call Gen Z lazy all you want, but you let the economy turn into what it did.
Some of the older generation that have already went into retirement and have some sort of wealth, they have a hard time empathizing and understanding the troubles that we are facing in this economy. Let's remember that not every elderly person is rich in retirement. Elderly generations face their own set of issues such as declining Social Security benefits and higher insurance premiums because of their age. This is the way it's always been. Every generation calls the one after them lazy. Gen X were called the slacker generation. In the 80s, people alluded to them taking longer to leave the parents' nest.
They told me to come back to work after 2 days absence with natural colour hair. And yet there was older people, sort of old women there and that, getting away with having their hair purple and various other colours. And they can do anything they want with it, yet blokes weren't allowed to do that. You had to sort of conform So they want you to look. You had to look business-like, they put it. So that's the reason why I left, really.
Do you see yourself having the same sort of future, the same sort of lifestyle as your parents?
No. My mum works all the time. I don't think I'll be working all the time. She works really hard. I won't be working that hard.
See yourself as having any kind of future like your parents did?
No way. Living in the city particularly, I'd rather go out and have a go out on the land and see what it's like out there.
You think there are opportunities still?
I think there is opportunity out in the land still, because somebody's got to get something for you to eat.
No, I don't think I want to get married.
Not at all?
Having children, no.
Why not?
I don't know, I just think it's too much of a hassle.
Take a look at this article from the Wall Street Journal. They aren't switching occupations because they have finally landed a meaningful career. Perhaps after a decade of hopscotching jobs in search of an identity, they're doing the kinds of things our society used to expect from 25-year-olds. Or take in the 1990s, where the Washington Post called out the youth saying, "What really distinguishes this generation from those before it is that it's the first generation in American history to live so well and complain so bitterly about it." A lot of the dislike of the new generation comes from the fear of change. We feel comfort in what we're used to. To see younger people change the way that things have always been, to kind of shake up the status quo, is something that people are afraid of. If you think about it, it was always the younger generation that brought about social change. Take, for example, the flappers of the 1920s that challenged the Victorian norms, or the hippies of the 1970s that rebelled against war. So yes, even the baby boomers and the Gen X generation, they were the young ones that were trying to change their society. Maybe old people forget how rebellious they were, but they were also marching back in the day. There is no doubt that there is an overlying lack of empathy that generations have for each other. Young adults of today are also not understanding of their elders. They've been through a lot. They know what it's like to work without labor laws, have a lot of generational traumas, and a lack of awareness around mental health.
And an element that needs to be recognized is the fact that the generation that raised the baby boomers, despite how we venerate them in this country, was deeply traumatized. Baby boomers were raised by a generation with a massive amount of trauma they were carrying around and very little institutionalized support to help them manage that trauma. So what did? They passed it on and fed it to their kids. This whole pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, nobody's coming to help you thing, they were fed that by their parents because their parents actually lived it.
Older people are sometimes ignored by the youth. Sometimes we don't take the time to have conversations with them, to really sit with them and listen to their experiences. We have little patience for them when they need help with technology or when they drive slow. What we don't realize is that our elders have a lot of knowledge. There's a lot that we can learn from them. Because a lot of the generations are not interacting with each other as much, that's why we have a lot of misunderstandings. I pose that if all generations take the time to understand each other, get rid of those preconceived notions, we wouldn't clash as much. We see this example of interacting and actually enjoying different generations when people are bringing back old trends or old fashion. There's always that one person that says, "I just feel like I don't fit in this generation." They feel that way because they took the time to actually learn about the generations before them, and they were able to identify with certain aspects of that said generation. In all, the generational wars is a societal phenomenon. It is one fueled by the fear of change and the misunderstanding of each generation's struggles. This is also caused by a lack of empathy between the generations. By interacting more, by wanting to learn more about each other, generations can interact and live in harmony. You will find that you can relate to people of different generations. Just talk to them. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Why do you think these generations do not get along with each other? And also, what's one thing about your generation that you like? Leave a comment in the comment section down below and I'll reply. If you like this video, please feel free to give this video a big thumbs up. That does help me out a lot. And also consider subscribing to the channel so you guys never miss a beat on when I post. I post weekly now. Have a good one and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya!